when I'm planning to create a program, there are different tools that I use. If I'm drawing something on the screen or having some sort of user interface like a web page with buttons, I do what's called a storyboard or wireframe first. They're not exactly the same thing. It depends on the environment that you're in. But in this case, we're just going to call it a storyboard, and it's a plan of what's going to go on the screen. In the last lecture, I showed you how to create lines, and this is just a little review. You'll notice that I drew lines every 50 pixels to help me plan where things were going to go. So if I were going to draw a single line on the screen, this would be my x1, y1 point, and this would be my x2, y2 point. So here, if I was going to write the code for this, the code would be line 20, 20, 240. And you end with a semicolon, because that's how you end most sentences in programming or lines. So let's say I want to draw some more shapes on the screen. I'm going to show you two additional shapes, and I will tell you drawing circles in Photoshop is easier for me than drawing it by hand. We have the line, which is the formula of x1, y1, x2, y2, and then we have a rectangle. You can draw a square using the rectangle tool because it's just a rectangle with the same width and height. When you're drawing a rectangle, the x, y coordinates are from the top left corner. And then you add the width and the height. So here, let's figure out the code for this one. This would be RECT and then we need the x, y coordinates. So x would be 20 and y would be 80. And then I would need my width, 160, and my height, which you see I figured out here, is 30. For a circle, you also have the x, y coordinates, width, and height, but with a circle, by default, it registers the circle from the center point. And I'm calling it a circle because my width and height actually are the same here, but technically it's an ellipse, and they don't have to be the same. So my formula here would be ellipse, x coordinate, y coordinate. So this is 100x, 200y. Then it would need my width and height. And you'll see that halfway across is 30, so the whole width of the circle is 60. The height of the circle is also 60. So now I have my plan to put all three shapes on the screen. Let's open up processing, and we will start a new program here. Okay, so when you are creating code in processing, I'm going to expect you to comment your code for basically each new shape. You should put enough comments in so you know what you're doing at each spot. So my first shape will be a line. So I'm just going to label it as line. And so then I will draw my line. And it is sort of self-documenting because it tells you there's a line here. And it's going to be 20, 20, 200, 40. Now when I program, actually I'm going to put that back, I make sure to test after every major thing that I can test. And here it's just going to be each shape. So I occasionally will hit stop first just to make sure nothing's running in the background, and then I'm going to hit play. Now I knew that I had an error here, but I wanted to show you what would happen on screen. It's telling you that there's a syntax error, maybe a missing semicolon. It expected a semicolon, it found a colon. So, and it highlighted yellow where the error was. So let's fix that. And you should test frequently. Oh, what did I do? Same thing as last time. I need to really define the size first. So the first thing I want to do is put in the size of my screen. And again, we're going to use 500 by 500. And we'll test it again. There we go. That's what I wanted. Okay, so we can keep going from here. And you can define this to yourself. Set screen size. I'm probably getting a little carried away with comments for somebody who's an experienced programmer, but since this is your first time learning to program, I want you to explain what each section of code means because it will help you to remember and really understand it. So I do expect you to thoroughly document your code, and you will be graded on having enough comments in there. Better to have more than not enough, and you're really explaining it to yourself. Please put your comments right before the line of code that they're describing. Okay, so the next one I'm going to do is a rectangle. And for that, the formula is rect 20, 80, 160, 30. So we'll type that in. And we'll test it. Again, you test frequently because it's easier to find an error in a small amount of code than in a large amount of code. Now, you'll notice this is actually getting a fill color. By default, your line color is black and your fill color is white. In a future chapter, we'll change those settings. But so far, so good. Now let's add our ellipse. And so my ellipse is 100, 200, 60, 60. Now, if you want to go further in commenting these to yourselves, what I would put in here to help myself remember exactly what it was is I would describe this as ellipse x, comma, y, comma, width, comma, height. And I'd put in a further corner registers, further comment, X and Y from center. Those are the things that I would need to know. And since you're going to save this information, you're going to be able to use these programming notes on your test when you have them. And that's going to make that a lot easier for you. So thoroughly document things. So for rectangle, my description to myself would be rect X, Y, width, height. And I would also note X, Y is top left corner. That way you'll have documented for yourself. Now you have to explain each program that you do, either the ones that you're copying from the book or the ones that you're working on from me. So you can do two ways to explain these to yourself. You can either put the comments directly into the code explaining what your code is doing at each line, which is the way I prefer to do it, or you can write a paragraph when you hand it in underneath that. So again, you would run the code, and I have an error, expected token, but there's nothing there. And there we go. And that pretty much matches what I drew out on my screen. So you can see how I planned and then created my sketch. So you'll want to play with these. What I want you to do on these is change the points and sizes. Don't hand them in exactly the way that I did them, but try making these different sizes. And remember, you'll have to stop and then restart to show them again. So you can see that my ellipse doesn't have to be a circle. So go ahead and play with these. Don't leave all the same settings that I had. And then, again, capture your code and your image and put them into your OneNote notebook.